Welcome to another Move the Stairs podcast. We are recording on Friday. This is May 12th, 2023, and we're glad you're going to join us. We're going to have a very interesting conversation today.
We are excited to talk to Gayla Huber. She's the president of IntegriShield, and this is a company that aligns with our philosophy in M&C Communications because you know what it does? It helps clients protect their brands, and you know how much we love that.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a really fascinating international company operating in over 50 countries. And what IntegriShield does is help to monitor, track, and enforce regulations for businesses so that they can remain in compliance and in good standing. And of course, we know that's incredibly important when you work in the cannabis space.
Indeed. So we're going to ask Gayla how IntegriShield helps businesses grow, maybe even save money at the same time. That's always nice, right? And protecting them from brand violations.
Yeah, that's great. So Gayla, we are welcome to join you. There you are. Hello, Gayla. How are you?
Hello. Great. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, thank you for coming on. We're so glad to have you. So tell me a little bit about your background and what people should know about IntegriShield.
All right. So my background is something that makes IntegriShield pretty unique. So I do tend to usually start with that. I actually have been in advertising for about 20 years. I've done everything from sort of the corporate branding side. But the last decade before IntegriShield, I was really focusing on direct response advertising, as we called it back in the day. Now we're performance marketing, digital marketing. One of the first digital marketers out there. So I was the person that, if you remember on your cell phones, when you used to have banners at the top and the bottom, that was me. So yeah, been doing this a while. But because of my background and really kind of focusing on the lead generation side and doing the digital advertising, it was back in about 2010, we started to notice that with regulations being heightened, a lot of our clients did not know what to do. They were just sort of floating out there. They didn't know how to read the regulations. They didn't know how to respond to them, or even just how to practically apply what they needed to do. So I spent a couple of years trying to see what we wanted to do about that, spending sort of my weekends and Saturdays and Sundays doing it manually. We looked for any solutions that already existed. There were none. So we ended up developing IntegriShield. And so, and I'm pretty lucky in that I have a majority owner investor who is willing to put money up and, really do things to protect not just consumers, but the companies out there that are the good actors that want to protect consumers. So that's how IntegriShield got started in 2012.
Great.
Awesome. That's great. Together, we mentioned that IntegriShield helps companies defend from brand violations. Now, the term brand violations, pretty self-explanatory, but I'm betting that some businesses out there thought, oh, I haven't thought about that. So explain why it's so important for businesses and how it helps build some customer loyalty.
All right. You'll have to remind me about the customer loyalty piece at the end because you got me stuck automatically on the brands not thinking about it. One of the number one things that we hear when we talk to folks is that they didn't even know, right? It's the unknown. They did not even know they needed to be doing what they need to be doing. So, but I mean, that's to be expected, right? We're all experts in what we do. If someone is in finance or CBD or whatever industry that they're in, they're the expert in that, right? So they don't always understand sort of the digital advertising space and what's out there, or the internet in particular, right? So, the big piece is really getting the awareness out there that there's a lot out there that people should be concerned about. There's things that you just don't even know are out there. And I've never, ever had a client come to me where there was something that they knew everything. Literally never had that happen. So, yeah. And on the loyalty side, so when we talk to clients, as you can imagine, once they find out it's out there, they're like, yes, what do we need to do about this? Let's fix this. But on the loyalty side, what we've found is that a lot of the content that's out there, that is the unknown content. So not what you know, not what you've paid for, but that unknown content can really confuse consumers. And just sort of like an example of that, sort of like maybe getting a little too early into the regulation talk, but when I go out and I analyze the FTC's database of consumer complaints, when I go out and analyze the CFPB's database of consumer complaints, we see all of these comments about, well, I reached out to this company and they never responded to me, but I gave them my information. And how scary is that? Like, I understand on the FTC side, we're probably more talking about, name, phone, email. But on the CFPB side, we're talking about bank account numbers, social security numbers, different things like that. And so these brands don't even realize that there are these websites out there that look like them, that consumers are entering in that information. And so it's just a really bad customer experience in general, but it's also really dangerous for the consumers. So on our side, it's not just loyalty. It's definitely loyalty at the end of the day. But a big piece of that is just in general, consumers not thinking that they're filling out your information and it ends up overseas somewhere.
Ooh, that's scary.
Yeah, no kidding. So that kind of dovetails into my next question, Gayla. I mean, because IntegriShield monitors quite a bit, whether it's social media, online advertising, just a couple of areas. What would you say are the top 3 areas or top 3 things that you're protecting companies from? What are the 3 most common things?
The most common, definitely the infringement. So whether you're trademarked or not, you're going to have products or services out there, your brand name out there that we need to make sure that people aren't mimicking or using that to steal traffic, different things like that. So in some cases, they're not trying to rip off consumers' data, but they certainly want to use those popular brand names to steal their traffic and all of that. So that's a really big one. A newer sort of issue that's out there is the unauthorized sales. There's a lot of that going on these days, whether that's, in the US, so Amazon is sort of a common one, but overseas too, they have Macari and different things like that would be similar to Amazon. So making sure unauthorized sales are not happening. And even, it's crazy the stuff people do, but it'll look like they're buying a particular product and they'll have the picture of the product, but when the consumer gets it, it's not the same product. So, and then I would say it's a toss up probably between regulatory issues and affiliate marketing. And I hate to say that because I was an affiliate marketer, but it is still kind of the Wild West out there. And even though you are paying someone and you have policies in place, they're using content creators and publishers that didn't go to school for this. And quite frankly, until recently, you could not get a compliance education. You could only go to law school or not, right? So you didn't really get a lot on the compliance side. But even if you're paying them or not, there's a lot of content out there that just it's just bad content in general, and it'll break either a regulatory violation or a branding violation.
That's great info. And going back to what you were saying before about somebody puts their information in, it turns out it was one of these lookalike websites. I think for our CBD owners, that's huge. Because there's a lot of regulations that could be broken in that situation. But also when you're talking about customer loyalty, once you put your information in and then all of a sudden you realize, I just had this happen on Facebook. I love QVC, and everybody on the call knows that I love QVC.
Me too.
Okay, good. And so there was a QVC outlet Facebook page, and they had some Dooney and Burke purses at an amazing price. And I'm like, oh, I've been looking for an outlet. I don't live near one. That's wonderful. Boom, 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 boom. And then when I got the email back, it came from China. Now, I got a purse. It looks like Dooney and Burke. I don't know whether it is or not. But that type of experience says, oh, you know what? I'm not, for Facebook alone, I'm not giving my information anymore, period, there, because I lost the trust. And I think that's the issue with consumer loyalty, is that it's trust. And if you go to one of these fake websites and then you find out you've been taken afterwards, it does cloud the image of the company that had nothing to do with it. So I'm wondering, have you had any situations like that where you've had a company who's had a problem, and then how did you deal with it?
So what we do, and it's a long process. I'm going to break this down really short, but first we have to identify in those situations, unfortunately, is it someone you authorized to do it or not? So that's, you handle it a couple different ways. But if it's typically a not authorized individual who did that, then we have to identify the owner. A lot of those folks are overseas, and that's just because they simply don't have to comply with a lot of our federal regulations that are out there. or the lack of in CBD, I should say. But yes, the regulations that are out there. And then once we identify the owner, we as a company have found that talking to someone with honey versus a stick tends to help what we're trying to accomplish. We know that these folks are probably bad actors, but a lot of them, once they're caught, not that they won't do it again, but once they're caught, they will quickly take it down as long as we don't make threats or try to involve anyone else initially. And so I would say probably 75% of the time that works the best. And then you have some other folks that they are aware of what they can get away with. So they'll continue to leave it up. At that point, we have really good working relationships with web hosters and registrars. So we'll go to one of them, report the fraud, and then work with them on getting that taken down. And that's what kind of covers us the rest of the way, because the hosters and the registrars don't want anything to do with that fraud either. So
right. That's great.
It's great to have those connections too. And it sounds like a really good news story, actually, which kind of moves us into the next phase of our podcast, Gayla, because you may or may not know, but myself, Mitch, Diane, we're all former journalists. And, we dive into that background a lot when we're preparing clients for media interviews and, consulting them on whether or not to take a media interview, because we look at those interviews as an opportunity in many cases to position them as a thought leader and instill that confidence in themselves and in their brand. So let's get into the media side of things. Do you have any tips for business owners when they get the call from media, especially when it pertains to things that you're working on, such as, hey, your company may or may not have been involved in some fraudulent activity here. What advice would you offer them?
Well, number one, have you met Diane, Mitch, and Jordan? That might be. But I guess if they haven't talked to you, so we do encourage all of our clients to make sure they're being proactive when it comes to that. And I've probably experienced the same thing that you guys have, which is there are some companies who are very shy when it comes to dealing with reporters. And we work with some really highly regulated industries. So there's always someone with an agenda. There's, or they might be afraid that a reporter has a particular agenda or something like that. But they really do. My tip to them would be to be proactive, make sure that, even if they're not working with you guys, as you guys know, have something ready, have your talking points ready, and make sure that you've looked at all the different scenarios that can happen with your brand. I know that I do that. I'm not even in a highly regulated industry, and you guys probably do that as well. But, if we were to get a call about a particular issue, we want to be ready and, make sure we're being proactive on that front. So that would be my number one tip. But I still think they should have a PR company like yours in place. And if they don't, that's kind of scary, especially if you're a highly regulated company.
Yeah, if all of a sudden you get that call from the media, what do I do? That's why, we always encourage businesses to kind of build a relationship with members of the media, so they know who the good players are. Who are the ones that are really sharp, who are the ones that maybe do have an agenda. So even if there's negative news that comes out, say about your industry, whatever it is, we always say don't shy away from that. That could be an opportunity, right, to shine and look like a leader in your arena, in your industry. But how do you suggest business owners handle the press if something maybe not so good comes out about your particular industry?
I do think people should face it head on. It's just like negative reviews. If you don't address it, it's just going to get worse. And then not to mention, we talked about consumer loyalty. It definitely can affect that as well. There's, I know we're specifically sort of on the CBD side here, but I'm in a lot of industries, and this does happen across the board. There's so much misinformation out there about different regulated industries. And again, it comes back to, depending on who's saying what, it's an agenda item. We know, because we work with so many brands that are what we call good actors in their spaces, right? They are not only working to protect their brand, but they work to protect their consumers and on down the line, right? Their entire ecosystems. That there is a story to be told there. So I think companies should absolutely be ready to tell those stories. If something negative comes out, even if it's not even necessarily specifically about your company, support that industry, right? Support that other company and have, some commentary ready to go on that, and make sure that you're responding to whatever has come out. That's, at least in our experience, that's always been the best way to handle that.
It's so true. I mean, there's always two sides to a story. Although sometimes that kind of gets muddied if the one side who can put the story into perspective is concerned enough that they're not even going to do any outreach. And then the story feels like it's two-sided and the other side is bad, as opposed to it's two-sided and there were reasons and this is why. And I think putting that perspective around is really important. But as Mitch said, really knowing those reporters is huge. How do you talk to companies about developing relationships with reporters? And do you think that's beneficial?
I do think it's beneficial. So we've had experience just ourselves where, because we work with billions of sets of data, right? So we're the internet worldwide, right? So the whole World Wide Web. And so we're looking at billions of URLs. We have a ton of content, a ton of data that sort of supports what's going on in different industries. And we know that it's beneficial because we've actually supplied that data for both state and federal regulators to take looks at in different situations that have arisen over time. And it has helped them. We've helped them be able to come back to the different regulatory groups like the FTC and folks like that and say, here's what you're proposing, but here's what's really happening, right? Here's all the data to support that. So absolutely, I think that they should be having their relationships with reporters. I know they don't all, again, this is why they need a company like yours, but I know not everyone knows how to do that. That's not what they do for a living, but if they have that opportunity, they should definitely be doing it.
Yeah, we agree.
Absolutely. One of the things we talk to companies about is building a resilient brand. They're like, yeah, no, I'm working on that. But we ask them, are you prepared if something goes south in the industry, in your own company? And they're like, oh, well, wait a minute. And so, one of the ways to create that resilient brand is to establish yourself, your business, as, again, the leader in that industry. So I'm curious, do you encourage business owners to be accessible to the media? In other words, if something happens in the industry, you think, oh, I'm going to call Jane at XYZ company because she's been open with me before and we can get to the bottom of the issue. Do you encourage them to be the expert in their industry?
Absolutely. And just as our own organization, we have reached out to a lot of our clients just to say, hey, you are someone, you have a lot of industry background, the entire ecosystem. Can we get your opinion out there on social media? Can we get it, so I know that I'm not the one that's going to hook them up with the reporters, but we are consistently every single week trying to get those folks to sort of share what's going on and be willing to put that out into the public so that they can really be seen as that industry expert. And I know that they are. We're really lucky. We work with some fantastic companies, some really great owners and C-suite folks that, they don't just know their piece, they know the entire ecosystem that exists out there. And they're doing it right. So yeah, definitely need to get all of their expertise out there.
One of the great things about brand protection PR is it helps companies prepare for the unexpected. Now, Gayla, you mentioned earlier in the podcast, never have you had somebody sign up to use your service that knew everything they needed to be on the lookout for. So how do you help them do that? Is there like an onboarding process where they come on and you go through your checkbox to say, okay, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at. How do you help them prepare?
Yeah, so since we specialize in the unknown, and I think we're probably the only folks that do that in the monitoring space, we do sort of know kind of where to look, right? All the corners of the internet where things like to live. But yeah, so when we meet a company, it's not real difficult with that check the boxes system. Like what are you doing? What are your brand? What are your products? What services do you have? where are you authorized to sell at, different things like that. And then we just go from there, right? So we throw out a net and start collecting all that unknown information. And then we turn around and say, hey, okay, here's everything you've got. Now let's see what we need to do about that, right? So like, let's make sure that you have documentation showing that it's not yours. Let's make sure we have documentation showing that you've attempted to take it down in the event that we couldn't get it taken down for some reason. And so really in the compliance space for us, it's really all about documenting everything and making sure that if someone does come knocking on your door, you have exactly everything that you need.
Gayla, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Gayla Huber, you are from IntegriShield. How do people get a hold of you?
You can find us at IntegriShield.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. We hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Man, that was a great conversation, wasn't it, guys?
Good information. Yes.
Yep. I loved how she talked about things like bad websites, bad actors on websites, and how they find those websites. And she also talked about using honey more than a stick. I love that too. I thought that was cool. But that 75% of the time, just making a phone call can get those sites down. But you may not even know that's happening. And imagine how that's impacting your customer loyalty.
Yeah, that she talked about that unknown content out there it just confuses the consumer, and that erodes you're trying to build customer loyalty. That will erode it. So no wonder they're focused on it, and so many companies take advantage of this.
Yep.
Yeah, one of the things I really enjoyed about the conversation is Gayla talked about, how do you deal with negative press or negative press opportunities, and that's what it is. It's an opportunity. And there are two sides to every story. And although the story may be focused on, hey, what are these bad actors doing? There's also a lot of good things that are happening in this space. And I just thought that was a really good example of bridging to a good message point that you may be bringing into one of these negative industry interviews where things may not be looking so great, but you have an opportunity. It's not a spin. It's educating the reporter and the audience to, hey, there are a lot of good things happening in the space, and we can't let one bad apple potentially spoil the whole bunch here.
Yeah, it's true. Point. And, that really leads into brand resilience, because it's not only just your brand, it's the industry. And when you're out there and you're really putting the perspective around whatever the issue is, you do position yourself as a thought leader. And in doing that, you build more of that relationship and trust with your customer. All of that comes back to brand protection PR, and that's why we're here. So what a great conversation. I can't wait to talk to our guest next week.
Very good. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thanks also to our special guest, Gayla Huber from IntegriShield, for joining us on this Move the Stairs podcast. Thank you for listening in. We hope you'll join us again for another episode of the Move